All right, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different since there's not really much for me to do in the markets until we find those cycle lows in about 2.5 weeks' time. I thought I would answer a question here from LifeVersity. LifeVersity said, "Hey Camel, on one of your videos, you showed every asset class chart compared to Bitcoin over time and how those assets would essentially become free if you held Bitcoin. Can I show this again in an upcoming video?" He can't find it for the life of him, and he's trying to show his father why it's a good idea to DCA into Bitcoin over time. So I thought I'd dedicate this video to LifeVersity and orange pilling your dad. Let's get to it. Let's do this together. So I think the thing with Bitcoin is it's many things to many people. A very wide range of things. To some people, the uneducated, it's a scam or a Ponzi scheme. It's even harmful to the environment. And then as you build on your Bitcoin education, and depending on your circumstances and where you're situated in the world, we start to find that Bitcoin is many things to many people, including a way to make more fiat. Now, this kind of defeats the object of Bitcoin, but it is certainly a way to make more fiat for some people. Some people see it as digital gold, an inclusive banking system, way to preserve purchasing power, an anti-war currency, and a way to say no to the IMF for smaller nations. And as you build up your Bitcoin knowledge, as you start to truly go down the rabbit hole and understand exactly what this thing is, you start to realize that this is the cheapest possible way to ensure against the collapse of the fiat debt-based system. I often say on this channel, Bitcoin is the exit. And so today I'm going to run through all of these. I'm not going to give any energy to the scam or the Ponzi scheme thing. The Ponzi scheme, of course, is the fiat currency system. And if you don't know that by now, then I don't know what to tell you. But let's start with this, right? Harmful to the environment. This one has lately been put to rest. But just for LifeVersity's dad here, we'll just point out a few things because you are probably going to run into some FUD as you start to do your Bitcoin research. First of all, here is Bitcoin mining sustainability, okay? Significantly more sustainable than all of these other industries right here. And we can also see that the mining emission intensity for Bitcoin, which is in purple, is significantly below that of gold and the banking system. Bitcoin, for many people, is a way simply to make more fiat. And whilst this kind of defeats the object of Bitcoin, it does, however, have its place as a portfolio diversifier. So Bitcoin is the apex predator of assets. It is the most thermodynamically sound asset on the planet. On the left here, you can see all these asset classes, and down the bottom, you can see the highest return. Bitcoin continues to do Bitcoin things, meaning it will continue to smoke every other asset class. The cumulative and annualized returns column speak for themselves with a whopping cumulative and annualized return for Bitcoin. So again, Bitcoin is a way to de-risk your portfolio. Keeping some allocation to Bitcoin in your portfolio is better than none. The only incorrect allocation to Bitcoin is 0. Bitcoin can also be thought of as a digital gold. Gold is the best money on the planet that we ever discovered, but Bitcoin is superior in almost every way simply because it has been designed and engineered. We found gold in the ground, right? But Bitcoin has improved on the best money that the planet had to offer at the time. Both Bitcoin and gold are scarce, but Bitcoin has far superior scarcity, and I will show you that in just a minute. Bitcoin is significantly more divisible than gold. Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million sats. Whereas obviously it's quite difficult to chip pieces off of your gold coin. It's also more portable. You can move Bitcoin anywhere in the world completely undetected and in a non-confiscatable manner by memorizing 12 words in your head. It's completely censorship resistant because Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. Nobody can get in the way of Bitcoin transactions. Nobody can stop you from transacting peer-to-peer using the Bitcoin network. It's also significantly more durable. The network has now reached a state where you simply cannot attack the network at this point. The only thing that Bitcoin currently lacks is an established history since it is a nascent technology. But remember, with every day that we continue to mine new blocks, Bitcoin continues to get stronger and stronger and start to work towards having an established history. Currently, the Bitcoin inflation rate sits marginally above that of gold. So this is blue here, this is Bitcoin, and red is gold. But as we approach this halving, which is currently scheduled for somewhere around the end of March of next year, Bitcoin supply will be cut in half again until we get 4 years down the line where it's cut in half again at the next halving. And that will continue until all 21 million Bitcoin have been mined by the year 2140. The key point I want to make here is there's a price for gold that motivates and incentivizes the hunt for more gold, right? So at some price, miners will decide that it's time to start mining beneath the ocean. And there's also a price where miners will decide, okay, time to go looking for gold in space. So As the price goes up for gold, it also incentivizes increased supply for gold. But the same is not true of Bitcoin. For Bitcoin, the inflation rate is fixed. Every 4 years it halves, like I said, until 2140 when all the Bitcoin will have been mined. And from that point, we move to transaction fees only. And the key take home here is as we approach this next halving, as we undergo this next halving and the supply for Bitcoin is cut in half, Bitcoin will become the scarcest and the hardest form of currency on the planet, with an inflation rate around half of that of gold. Mining gold, as you can see at the top, does devastating things to the planet versus mining Bitcoin, which incentivizes clean and renewable energy. Since August 10th, 2020, when MicroStrategy adopted its Bitcoin strategy, you can see that Bitcoin has absolutely smoked the performance of gold since then. This is a trend. This is something we are going to continue to see from Bitcoin as Bitcoin continues to eat every other asset class alive. There's also a massive opportunity ahead of us because we have this spot ETF going on, right? We have this spot ETF for Bitcoin, and we saw this with gold before. Once they launched the spot ETFs for gold, we saw a tsunami of inflows flow into the gold space, and massive price appreciation was undergone thereafter. And for Bitcoin to function as digital gold and to eventually reach parity with the market cap of gold, which currently sits at around 13 trillion, whilst Bitcoin's market cap is currently sat around 600 billion. Upon reaching parity with gold's market cap, we would likely see a $700,000 Bitcoin price. So for those people that see Bitcoin as a digital gold, there's certainly an argument to be made there. Like I said, Bitcoin is many things to many people, but more importantly, if you do not live in a privileged society, then Bitcoin functions as an inclusive banking system, banking the unbanked. The world's top 5 unbanked countries have more than 60% of their population without bank accounts, and the number of unbanked individuals is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.7 billion people worldwide. So for these nations with highly corrupt or highly permissioned banking systems, what we find is Bitcoin adoption is thriving. This right here goes back to 2020. So Bitcoin's usage is inverse to privilege. Whilst people that live in privileged countries such as the UK and the US, for example, are slow and or afraid to understand Bitcoin, in countries like Nigeria, 30% of the population already uses Bitcoin as a store of value and as a medium of exchange. And like I said, this is back in 2020. Since then, fast forward to 2022, and the amount of the population reached 45% for Nigeria using Bitcoin on a daily basis. This is because it's highly difficult for people in countries such as Nigeria to get access to a banking system. But Bitcoin continues to bank the unbanked in these less fortunate, less privileged areas such as Nigeria. We also are seeing Nigeria surpass the likes of El Salvador as a leader in Google searches for Bitcoin. So again, it really is banking the unbanked in places such as Nigeria, where we would likely in this sort of country take for granted the fact that we have access to a banking system, and despite the government corruption that exists worldwide. Has your bank ever stolen your money directly from you? Probably not. But unfortunately, this is the reality of many other nations around the world. Again, this forces these types of countries and nations to adopt Bitcoin as a way of becoming self-sovereign, as a way of having non-confiscatable money that cannot be seized or frozen. Bitcoin is also a way to preserve purchasing power in highly inflationary environments. So if I use Argentina as the first example, we can see that right here we have triple-digit inflation over in Argentina. But Bitcoin continues to function as an exit and as a purchasing power preserving mechanism. As you can see in Argentina, this is Bitcoin against the Argentinian peso, continuing to set fresh all-time highs. It's a similar story in Turkey. Turkey has massive spouts of inflation, currently sat at around 59% year over year. And Bitcoin priced against the Turkish lira also continues to set fresh all-time highs. Again, Bitcoin functions as one of the best purchasing power preserving mechanisms the world has ever seen. But it isn't just in these failing fiat currencies like the Turkish lira or the Argentine peso that we see this. This is eggs, grade A large, cost per dozen, priced in Bitcoin directly from the US Fed website. What you can see is over time, eggs essentially become free, priced in Bitcoin. This works in pretty much any commodity. Right here, we have sugar, gold, livestock, corn, and wheat all priced in Bitcoin, and you can see the exact same trend develop, right? DCAing into Bitcoin and holding it for the long term makes all of these commodities, including gold, essentially become free over time. Now, it continues to get better because here are home prices priced in Bitcoin. So it's not just these commodities that become essentially free over time for people that stack and hold Bitcoin for the long term. It's also home prices. Houses essentially become cheaper and cheaper by the year if you just DCA into Bitcoin and hold them. This is home prices priced in Bitcoin. Again, you can see for people that stack Bitcoin and hold it for the long term, everything gets cheaper over time. You DCA $100 a month here on a monthly basis, then over that 4-year cycle, you will have accumulated around 0.6 Bitcoin. It would have cost you around $7,000 and your return on investment would be 131%. And the magic of DCAing into Bitcoin is that even if you use $5 on a weekly basis, okay, it would have cost you $1.5 grand. You would have ended up with 0.13 Bitcoin. And in today's value, you would still be up close to 130% over that time. Now, of course, we could go longer and shorter, but again, I say the only wrong allocation to Bitcoin is zero. Do not underestimate just getting off zero. Even $5 a week or $5 a month is better than zero. And as you go deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole, you will see that you likely want more than $5 a month. So in addition to everything I've covered so far, Bitcoin is also an anti-war, pro-freedom, pro-hope, pro-future currency. It gives places, countries, nations, a way to say no to the cartel-like behavior of the IMF. So El Salvador is known in the Bitcoin world for being the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. The IMF, which functions like a cartel or a mafia, was very, very quick to be begging El Salvador to remove Bitcoin as legal tender. There was an awful lot of news, fake news, fear, uncertainty, and doubt trying to throw shade on El Salvador for doing this. But of course, the people in the know understand why, right? The IMF functions like a mafia or a cartel. It deliberately wants to lend money to these smaller nations that it knows it can never pay back, just how a mafia or a cartel boss would do with a local business, thus forcing these smaller countries into the pockets of the IMF. And thus the IMF gets to have a controlling stake and a controlling say in what this poor country does. But thanks to adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, they have managed to be able to pay off their IMF debt. They've managed to be able to say no to the cartel and the mafia-like organizations. And since then, the IMF has been forced to admit that Bitcoin risks in El Salvador have not materialized. They are still, however, saying they should be addressed. But of course they would say that because they want to continue to indebt and enslave these smaller nations. So Bitcoin is anti-war, it is pro-freedom and pro-individual nation and country sovereignty. This trend continues to catch on as the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, continues to meet with more and more countries to discuss Bitcoin. The more that this is being proven in El Salvador, the more these other smaller countries and nations that are also in the pocket of the IMF are looking to exit the system and protect themselves and follow in the footsteps of El Salvador. Remember, fiat currency is backed by nothing more than a promise of the government that it will go to war to defend that currency. When a government or country feels like it needs to go to war, it will print an indefinite amount of money to fund that war, whereas Bitcoin is backed by proof of work. Bitcoin does not need to defend itself by printing more money. It does not need to defend itself by going to war. It is a neutral currency owned by no one, controlled by no one, and thus is the most ethical form of money the world has ever seen. Bitcoin is also the cheapest possible way to ensure against the collapse of the fiat debt-based system. So I've got here this US debt clock. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I have pulled all of the numbers in the next calculations off of here. The USA is insolvent today. So income currently sits at $4.3 trillion, but their expenses or entitlements are minus $1.3 trillion for Social Security, minus $1.6 trillion for Medicare. Military spending currently sits at $800 billion US. So if you do the maths, they end up with $600 billion left over. But the debt is currently sitting at $33 trillion for the USA. The US 10-year yield currently sits at 4.5%. So the interest on these bond payments alone is over $1.5 trillion annually. This means the only way they can keep this going is to roll over the debt by issuing more debt. This is akin to paying off one credit card with another credit card. And from this, we can derive three things. One, that the USA is insolvent. Two, the fiat debasement is mathematically guaranteed. And three, since fiat debasement is certain, the dollar will continue to weaken until it eventually collapses. So as I often say on this channel, Bitcoin is the exit. Bitcoin is the insurance on this house of cards that is the debt US-based fiat currency system. The last couple of points I want to make here is that a 5-year credit default swap on the USA currently sits at 20 basis points. A credit default swap is like the insurance against a country or a nation defaulting on its debt. So this means it will currently cost you $20,000 per year to insure $10 million of US Treasury debt over a 5-year period. But by buying Bitcoin, you get default protection on the USA for 20% of the cost, and you get default insurance on all other fiat currencies for free. And keep in mind all of this with no counterparty risk. You're not buying this instrument from a Bear Stearns or a Lehman Brothers. Bitcoin carries no counterparty risk so long as you withdraw it to cold storage. And lastly, global assets currently sit at 900 trillion US dollars. Bitcoin should capture 5% of that, which gives us a price target of around $2 million per Bitcoin, and that's in today's money. However, the price is currently sat at around 25k per Bitcoin. This means the market thinks there's a little over 1% probability of that happening. This 1%, if you think about it, if it was 20k Bitcoin, right, and a 5% capture of global assets gives us a $2 million Bitcoin price, then if this was 20k, it would be 1%, right? 20k is 1% of 2 million. So we are currently sat, the market currently thinks there's a little over 1% probability that we are going to see Bitcoin capture 5% of global assets. Now, am I 100% sure we will get to 5%? No. But am I more than 1% sure we will? Yes, absolutely. I am more than 1% sure we will. And thus, Bitcoin is the greatest asymmetric upside risk trade the world has ever seen. Like I said, Bitcoin is many things to many people. For people that are living in unbanked, uninclusive systems where they can't get access to banks, where the governments are highly corrupt, where it's really difficult to protect purchasing power, Bitcoin offers an exit. For those countries and nations that are completely in the pockets of these cartel organizations like the IMF. Again, this is an anti-war currency. This is a hope for the future and a chance for these nations to become self-sovereign and pay this debt off that would have otherwise been impossible to pay back. For the lower IQ amongst the Bitcoin community, there is certainly a chance to make more fiat, although why you would want more fiat given the maths that I have shown you is somewhat beyond me. There is also this digital gold narrative, again, depending on how much of a privileged nation you happen to live in. And lastly, as I've shown you, this is the greatest asymmetric upside risk trade the world has ever seen. This is also the cheapest default insurance that you can get your hands on. And like I said, not only does it carry no counterparty risks, but you get default insurance and fiat currency collapse insurance on all other fiat currencies for free. So Bitcoin remains the exit. Bitcoin remains many things to many people. Like I said before, the only wrong allocation is 0. Okay, just putting 5% Bitcoin in your portfolio has been shown time and time again to de-risk the portfolio risk of a standard 60-40 bond stocks split. So LifeVersity, I hope you found this helpful. I hope your dad is considering getting off of 0, and I hope that anyone else that found this video has enjoyed watching it. As always, if you have anything to say, throw it down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I know I probably missed out a few things, so if I did, again, feel free to throw them down in the comments. And in the meantime, I hope you're doing well in life. Take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.